Well, now President Uhuru Kenyatta has maintained he shall not bow to NASA's pressure to address a joint session of the 12th Parliament. Uhuru dismissed boycott calls by NASA, saying Parliament can function fully with or without NASA members. This latest development in the power struggle between NASA and Jubilee kickstarts our conversation on Political Point segment of the show. And in studio, I have lawyers Dr. Alutlala Muhwana and Oliver Mutai to steer the discourse. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for joining us this morning. Let me start with you, Dr. Muhwana. And first of all, let's look at things from what I'd call either black or white, legal or not legal. Is the president within the law for him to address Parliament today?
Thanks, Michael. As always, a pleasure interacting in this session. Yes and no. You have said black or white. When you are looking at the law, you must always look at what we call the letter of the law.
And the spirit of the law.
Thank you. Let's look at the letter of the law. Section 132 gives the powers of the presidency what he is entitled to perform as a president in normal circumstances. Section 134 gives a limitation to those powers in as far as that presidency is in a state that is known as the state of incumbency. Now, a state of incumbency, for purpose of explanation, is that time between the time when the voting is done to that time when the declaration and the swearing of the president is done. Now, the law envisages that during that time, the country must run. There must be no vacuum. So the president remains the president, no doubt about it. However, the Constitution limits what it is that he can do.
He has limited powers.
Thank you. Now, during that time, to be fair to the president, there is no express provision that says he cannot address Parliament. I haven't come across it. So to be fair to the president and his Jubilee side, who are saying we must address the Parliament, there is no express legislation in the Constitution, so to speak. However, if you look at the spirit of the law, if you look at the spirit of the Constitution, and if you look at the overall principles and values of the Constitution, it becomes difficult to justify why the president then appears to be in a hurry to go and address the Parliament, which ordinarily should be addressed by a president who has full powers, because part of what he has to do during that address is to give the direction and agenda of his government going forward. So if you look at the spirit of the Constitution, then yes, you have doubts. Because, look, let's be clear here. We do not know come October 17th whether the president will be Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta or Honorable Raila Odinga. Of course, this is not a statement the Jubilee side would want to hear, because as far as they are concerned, Uhuru will be the president. But the same thing happens to NASA. They want to hear that Uhuru will be the president come October 17th. They think that it will be Raila. So, Michael, it is a no and a yes, depending
at the same time.
Thank you. Whether you're looking at the spirit of the law or you're looking at the letter of the law.
Right.
Nothing expressly prevents the president from addressing Parliament.
Kipchumba, do you agree that as regards the spirit of the law, because when it comes to the letter of the law, really, I think it is very clear, there's no argument about it, that he can, as the president, address. But when it comes to the spirit of the law, then that's where there is a bit of doubt. Your thoughts on that?
Michael, thank you for the interaction. I think we must read the Constitution in a manner that broadens the space of democracy. And we must read it not with bipartisan lenses, but we must read it as it is. When we read the Constitution and we begin with Article 94, it talks of Parliament shall promote and protect the democratization of this country and protect the Constitution. The letter of the Constitution, as has been stated by Dr. is clear. When you read 132(1), it says that the president shall address the first sitting of the Parliament. And at this stage, who is the president? Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta is the president. I think whether or not he should address Parliament is well addressed in Article 134(2), which states what the president can do and what he can't do. And addressing Parliament does not fall within 134(2). Therefore, he is in order to address. Another thing we must look at, Michael, is we must know that this country must move forward. We cannot hold this country ransom. that because we still have a presidential election pending, the country can't move forward. That is not the spirit of the Constitution.
But the reason why the Constitution has put limited powers for the president within that what is called the incumbency period is because it envisages that the country must move on. Yes, there cannot be a vacuum, but at the same time limits the powers. And just like Daktari has mentioned here, one of the things or the agendas of the president, whoever the president would be at that time, addressing parliament at that time, is to set the agenda for his government. Now, that would be a big question because what government are we talking about? Would it be the government of Uhuru Kenyatta or would it be the government of Raila Amolo Odinga?
But Michael, you must ask yourself first things first. The government as it is now is the government of President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta. Whether we'll have another government post-17th is a different thing altogether. But what must happen is that Parliament must begin and Parliament must move on so that we do not seem like we are holding back the nation, so that we seem like we promote the Constitution, that there is no vacuum in power.
All right, so maybe before I come back to Dr. Mukhwana, the question then would be, what train smash or what emergency is there by holding parliament right now, as opposed to waiting until the 17th, or let's say until the president is sworn in, whoever the president will be?
One, Michael, we must be sure that there is no emergency. That one, there is no emergency. But the president is performing his functions at this state of incumbency. And one of the functions is to open parliament. There is nowhere that prohibits him from doing that.
Okay, Dr. Mukhwana,
yes,
maybe there's a valid fact there that nothing stops him from doing that. And at the same time, could it be a possibility then that he can address Parliament without necessarily giving the agenda for his government?
Michael, I keep saying that every time we come to this studio, it's important that you understand our backgrounds. If you are talking to a pro-Jubilee person, then this clearly is an opportunity for them to drum down the throat of NASA that, look, you may have won the petition, but we are here and we will do it as if you don't exist. If you had the Deputy President's language when he appeared on Citizen last night, he was hosted by on Monday by Hussein Mohammed, he said something which scared some of us. He said that we have such a majority that we can even change the Constitution without NASA. Yesterday, the president repeated the same thing,
the same words,
that we can actually change the Constitution without them. So really, those remarks can only mean one thing, that what the Jubilee side of the divide wants to do is to gloat over their superiority in terms of numbers and drum that down the throat of the NASA supporters. Because if you ask me, and you rightly put it, between now, we have less than 30 days to the election. What will go wrong if the president doesn't address the parliament today? What will go wrong? And your difficulty is mine too. However, you must understand this in the context of the wider political contest.
And we'll look at the politics of side of things, because at the end of the day, there is the, like you've rightly put it, the letter of the law, the spirit of the law, but I think we also have another spirit, the political spirit that is there. But let's first of all look at it and let's listen into Uhuru Kenyatta's justification for insisting on the reopening of the 12th Parliament, even as NASA's opposing the move.
In the National Assembly, with 220-something, we are only now 13 members shy of a two-thirds majority, meaning we can even change the Constitution of Kenya without a single member of NASA. With 41 senators elected and nominated, we can do business in the Senate without a single member of NASA present in the Senate.
Kipchumba, is that a scary statement for you? Or is it just the president gloating and bragging and saying that, you know what, even if I lost this particular election on the 17th, then we still have a majority in parliament and we're still a force to reckon with?
Michael, I think the first thing which we must address is that whatever the president was talking and the deputy, the previous day, he was talking about the superiority of Jubilee in terms of numbers. it is a matter of, it has just been taken out of context. It is just a way of telling them we have the numbers and you know we are in a political season. So once in a while you must show that you are superior in terms of numbers and you can move on. And numbers don't lie. Jubilee has 220-something members of parliament. It is, and it must be known that they are there, and the president can move on with business. I know that we know the quorum of parliament. We know how much it is. So therefore, it is not a statement that he was saying we will do whatever he meant. It was just a matter of showing them the superior numbers we have.
All right, and well, you don't find that as a scary statement coming from the president, because the president is not just a politician, but he's an holder of office. And one of the things that he does is that he swears to protect the Constitution. Now, when he uses the same Constitution and threatens that because of the numbers we have as politicians, we can alter it, isn't that literally diminishing the power of the people that set up that Constitution?
I think what we must look at, whatever the president was saying, one, he was addressing a political function. We must not take that out of that context. Two, it was just to show the impact of the numbers, what the numbers can do. Because to amend a constitution, you must tell us what you are amending it for. It is not just a talk that I will amend the constitution. There are other safeguards. You do not just wake up and amend the constitution. There are sections of the constitution which cannot be amended by parliament but via referendum. So I think we must put it in its rightful context.
All right, Dr. Mukwana?
Yeah, Michael, I keep saying that the president has to understand that he must rise above the Jubilee Party. He's a president if and when he's elected on October 17th. He will be the president, not of Jubilee or of NASA,
but of Kenya.
But of Kenya. Today, even as he remains the incumbent, even with the temporary incumbency, he remains the president of Kenya. And therefore, what he was stating about Jubilee being able to run the show in Parliament and in the Senate without NASA need not be restated. It's a fact that they have the numbers, and therefore they can transact business. That is not something to be disputed. However, there must always be humility even in victory. And you cannot keep gloating over your numbers just because you have the numbers. He remains the symbol of national unity. And whenever he opens his mouth, whereas he's playing to the audience of Jubilee, he must always remember that there is that minority in a corner somewhere in this country which still must be encouraged that all is not lost for you as a citizen of this country. Let me tell you, Michael, why it is very scary, and my young colleague doesn't seem to appreciate this. During the era of KANU, it was the superiority of numbers that finally led to a one-party dictatorship. When the president and the deputy actually say that what we have attained in this election, gentlemen, is enough to do without NASA, they're not just addressing NASA. They're addressing the 6 million or the 8 million, depending on how you look at it, who voted for NASA. So those Kenyans who are not pro-Jubilee have a reason to worry. And yesterday, if you watch the program, I think it was on one of the media stations in the evening, where there was the Uasin Gishu women rep, Gladys Boss-Sholei, and Homa Bay women rep, I think, Honorable Gladys Wanga. One of them mentioned something that you can tie up with this, that she said, look, if you guys think that because you have the numbers, therefore the rest of us don't matter, that is why the issue of secession, the talk of secession and divorce is coming up. Because, yes, you have the numbers, but does it mean that the minority have no stake in the running of the affairs of the country? And that debate, though it was muzzled, it has reigned supreme on social media. That is something that can be very easily revived in the sense that, yes, you have the numbers, but you're not humble enough to admit that the minority also need to have a stake in the running of the government.
All right, but Dr. Mukwana, where do we draw the line between politics And because these are politicians.
Yes, they
and
are.
they are bound to posture and make statements that would, it's like a fight, as it were.
It is.
Where you have two boxers and they're taunting each other,
Yes.
saying, I will definitely floor you.
Yes.
And that's what politicians are known to do. So at
Yes.
what point do we draw the line where now a politician is no longer just politicking, but are actually stating fact?
It is difficult, Michael. The line between politicking and what is legal is very thin in terms of the actual practicality. That is where statesmanship comes up. That as a head of state, he rises up everybody else. And even as he addresses his Jubilee audience, which want to hear what he's talking, by the way, to the Jubilee audience, they really want to hear what he's saying.
It tickles their ears.
Yes, and he's telling them, look, don't panic about this election. He goes further and says that even if Honorable Raila was to win, he'll go nowhere.
We can impeach him.
We'll impeach, not can.
Or we can,
We will. We will impeach him in under 3 months. So really, he's, to be fair to the president, in terms of politicking, he's saying exactly what his people want to hear. But as a head of state, he must have some little reserve for the rest of the non-Jubilee supporters who still see him and ought to see him rightfully as their president and the symbol of national unity. Because you do not become a symbol of national unity by saying, since we have won the majority, we don't care what the minority feel, we will have our way through and through. Look at the proposition to impeach Raila. You see, an impeachment motion is clearly stated in the Constitution, the grounds for upon impeachment. He's not even addressing himself to those grounds. What he's saying, regardless of those grounds, if he wins this election, he will not rule for 3
But
months.
isn't that where the politics comes in? Because if you look at the Constitution and the grounds to which one would have to impeach a president,
Yes.
it's definitely not something that just requires a two-thirds majority. You need some very grounded facts to do that. So this being a political statement, it's playing to the gallery. Practically, it may not be that easy.
But Michael, these are guys who have already said they can change the Constitution. What stops them from going into Parliament, changing the law on the requirements of impeachment and going ahead to impeach the president? And going ahead to impeach the president. That is why it is scary. The fact that you have the majority behoves of you to use that majority with a semblance of respect for the minority and for the overall principles and values of the Constitution. Because for those who are non-Jubilee, it is a very scary statement. They are saying that once we are in Parliament, my friend, it will be our agenda.
charge.
Correct, it will be agenda. So what stops them from amending all the laws that they think they are not right and going ahead, therefore, to have the ground for impeachment?
All right.
Regardless of whether by the time Raila was winning the presidency, if he wins, he indeed, those particular grounds were there or not. That is the scary bit.
That's a scary bit.
Yes.
All right, and the question might be, how did we get here? How is it that Kenya found itself here? Let's just go through some of the facts and figures that we have that got us to where we are today. And of course, this is after we had the elections on the 8th of August. And that, of course, was taken to the Supreme Court. So on 1st of September 2017, the Supreme Court ruling came in and nullified the election to be null and void. President Kenyatta, as re-election was made null and void. The IEBC was ordered by the Supreme Court, as per the Constitution, to have elections held in another 60 days. So that's basically what happened, and the court to issue full ruling in 21 days, which again leaves the IEBC in a very difficult position. Reason being, they are basically making amendments or shooting in the dark, as it were, in regards to what were the reasons that the Supreme Court nullified the election. Now, on the 22nd of September is when it's expected, the date of the full ruling. As per what they gave, 21 days would expire on the 22nd day of September 2017. Now, that leaves only 25 days before the repeat presidential election, given that the IEBC has already gazetted the 17th of October as the election day. Now, the IEBC is to conduct the repeat election on the 17th of October, and two candidates are on the ballot, and that is President Uhuru Kenyatta and the opposition leader Raila Amolo Odinga. The winner of this particular election will be announced within 7 days. So that's basically where we are at. And existing drawbacks is the repeat poll preparations without details of, the errors committed by the IEBC, which will only have 25 days for IEBC to do that. We know that they are at a retreat right now, but do they really know the reasons why it was null and void? maybe not. Just 25 days of a full ruling to finalize the election. And of course, the election we know is going to cost 12 billion shillings to the taxpayer. That has so far not come out because one might ask, what is the price of democracy? And it is very, very expensive. Existing drawbacks also is a widely divided parliament and limited ballot paper tendering period, given that that might also be one of the reasons that the Supreme Court may have nullified the election based on maybe some of the ballot papers not having, or rather the Form 34As and Form 34Bs not having the required security features. So that's where we are today as a country. Let me start with you, Mr. Kipchumba, on now IEBC. They are out on a retreat in Naivasha. But are you concerned that possibly with only 25 days when the full ruling comes out, the full text of the ruling rather, from the Supreme Court, there may not be enough time for the IEBC to prepare themselves for a credible election to avoid going back to the Supreme Court again?
Michael, I think the first point we make, and it has been made before about the IEBC as an independent commission, is that one, they were indicted by the Supreme Court when the ruling was made. And as we go forward, we understand that there are some problems, pertinent problems with the electoral body. But from where I sit, I think we should support it now without being or without forgetting that there are people who have committed electoral offenses within the IEBC. How comes we have a returning officer who did not sign a document? How come we have a presiding officer who did not or forgot to write the handover notes? Those are the questions we must ask ourselves, even as we await for the ruling.
And the question is, are you confident that they would be in a position to deliver credible elections, given the timelines that we have?
I might not be confident about them delivering a credible election, but what are the options we have? That is what we should ask ourselves as a country. We might not have too many options, and that's why we are in a position whereby, one, we must first strengthen the institution that it is IEBC. There was a talk in town some time back that the Supreme Court must redeem itself loosely. Now I think it is also time for the IEBC to redeem itself and conduct an election which must be per the threshold of the law, the Constitution, and Maina Kiai versus the IEBC. I think the law was set there by what is the standard or the threshold of conducting an election.
All right. Dr. Mukhwana, are you confident that IEBC may be positioned or set up to fail given the timelines, just the timelines?
Michael, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to tell if indeed the IEBC is in a position to deliver a free, fair, and credible election. The timing is not so much an issue as is the environment within the IEBC itself. If all was well within the IEBC, and if the machine, all the parts of the machine
were properly oiled
and they are in tandem and they are in sync, we will not worry so much about the 25 days to be left after the judgment, is delivered. The issue we should be discussing more, Michael, is whether or not it is right, it is proper that we should go into an election before the problems that led to the nullification of the presidential election are addressed. And not only addressed, but addressed in terms of consultation with the bigger players, with the biggest players. Because I have said on this show many times that yes, the IEBC is an independent institution, but the same independence is regulated. And it says, actually, under section 7 of the IEBC Election Act itself, number 9 of 2011, where it says that it shall be an independent body. However, that must not be prejudicial to the principle of public participation and consultation with stakeholders. So for me, what IEBC ought to be doing, and I'm happy they went for a retreat in Naivasha, except what again is filtering from that retreat is very disturbing, that they all agree to do a self-check and remedy the problems that brought us where we are. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be honesty on the part of both political players. And that is digging the holes deeper and deeper in IEBC. Let me give you an example. How on earth will you convince a section of the population that it's okay to go into this election before we know why, for example, the GPRS, the GPRS for the KIMS was switched off on the 5th, and therefore we are not able to know where these KIMS were being operated from. Just one of the example of the many. Now, so when you listen to the other side of the political divide, they just gloss over this. It was very interesting to listen to the Deputy President on that day. And when Hussein Mohammed seemed to insist on his reaction about these allegations, his answer was that Chiloba answered that. We didn't know Chiloba had answered. At least the public didn't know that Chiloba had answered that. And you should bring Chiloba here to explain and do that to the satisfaction.
I'll ask you to hold that thought right there, because we need to release KTN Home as we continue with this conversation. And those of us on KTN Home, Life and Style is just about to begin. For those of us on KTN News, we continue with this conversation. And, well, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, let's continue, well, right from there where we left off on where we are when it comes to IEBC, and also whether they're going to be prepared for the election. This is Morning Express. We take a short break. We'll be right back.